I was challenged by a combatives instructor with a question. He asked, why does the psychology of violence even matter? I mean, if you're getting punched in the face, who cares why? Well, I wasn't able to articulate the answer at that time because I was being punched in the face. But it was a fair question, and I've thought about it for a very long time. And this is my answer. The answer to the question, why does it matter, is, well, it doesn't matter when you're getting punched in the face. The psychology of violence matters before the violent event. The psychology of violence gives you awareness so that you can see events as they unfold and see those pre-threat cues. It arms you with critical thinking skills so you can make decisions before you get punched in the face. If I step out onto a street with no awareness and no critical thinking skills, I'll get hit by a car. But if I have awareness and critical thinking skills, I can look down the road, see the potential for danger, and make good decisions. But true, if I am flying through the air after being hit by a car, critical thinking skills won't do me any good at that point. The psychology of violence has value before an assault. Violence happens on a timeline. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. We aren't Star Trek, where we just beam into an assault in progress. However, if we're unaware, it might seem like that, but that's not how it is. On this timeline, there are precursors, and there's a beginning. And that beginning goes all the way back to where were you born? And what were you born into? I mean, we can go back further, but we're gonna try to keep this simple. So where were you born? Were you born in a stable society, in a stable community, in a stable family? Those things make a difference on how you develop. And next, down the timeline, how were you raised? Were you raised in a way that made you feel valuable? Were healthy boundaries modeled for you? Did you have a good education? Did you have a lot of adverse childhood experiences? And this blew my mind when I learned that women who experience more than 4 adverse childhood experiences are 7 times more likely to be raped later in life. So as the timeline continues, we can ask, how have you organized your life? What is the drug and alcohol consumption? Your career choices, partner choices. What does your social network look like? How are your negotiation skills? And how have you developed your personal value? Can you enforce boundaries? Are you helpless and dependent on others? Do you take unnecessary risks without considering consequences? Do you take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally? Are you strong and fit? Have you developed bodily autonomy? Can you overcome the politeness trap? So as you see, as we travel through this timeline, we develop factors that put us at risk or help us circumvent a violent event later in life. As we go on in our lives, we make critical decisions. And are those decisions putting us in a higher risk factor? Are we placing ourselves with dangerous people doing dangerous things in dangerous places? Even then, before a violent encounter, there's likely going to be precursors to that assault. And as we know, we call those precursors red flags. Are we able to see those signs and make decisions that will help us to avoid a bad situation? Or are we unaware and oblivious to the red flags because our lives are so chaotic, or perhaps we're conditioned to deny them? What decisions do we make when confronted with a problem or a threatening confrontation. Not every problem needs to be solved with combatives. De-escalation skills can avoid many problems. Then there's the actual assault. Can you? Bye-bye. So this is where your combative ability or martial arts skills might help you. Can you fight? Can you survive the assault? And now, continuing down the timeline even further, there's the aftermath. There are social repercussions, possibly medical trauma, mental health struggles, wondering why it happened to you, emotional trauma with feelings of betrayal, guilt, shame, fear, anxiety. When an assault happens, there is trauma. And in that trauma, people develop adaptations. And those adaptations are usually unhealthy and create destabilization. Destabilization makes the person even more vulnerable, and sometimes they get caught in the vicious cycle of abuse and victimization. My hope is that by studying the psychology of violence, that we can see the assault coming from a distance away and develop the tools to circumvent it before it's right up in your face. The reality is many people are growing up with abuse, trauma, or neglect, and so they aren't able to develop the boundaries and ethics and bodily autonomy and conflict management skills. And that makes them especially vulnerable to more abuse throughout their lives. So in conclusion, I believe it's important, if you are studying self-defense, that you consider not only the violent event, but also everything in the past that led up to it, so we can prevent it in the future. That's why the psychology of violence matters. Violence happens on a timeline, and we want to identify and circumvent the potential for violence as early as possible.